Bien, tenemos 20 minutos, una breve introducción para que luego sean ustedes los que les hagan todas las cuestiones a Gunny Harbour. Yo creo que claro, el mundo de Dios es maravilloso y realmente es verdad que la identificación de Mies con el sentido de Dios en los detalles está presente en todas las imágenes. La primera, la verdad es que Mies no ha tenido nunca desperdicio en sus fotos, ¿eh? La primera es como fantástica, esa foto que mira al exterior y cómo está él. Él no tiene desperdicio, ¿eh? El pañuelo que se le sale por el bolsillo, el puro, su mirada. Bueno, nunca ha tenido desperdicio. La verdad es que las fotos de Mies, que siempre van más allá, probablemente ese mundo de Dios está ahí presente, no solo en los detalles. Pero la verdad es que no tiene desperdicio nada de él, esa es la verdad. Y en esa foto también tenía la mano en el bolsillo. Bueno, es que es una foto como para estudiarla, ¿eh? Es muy de Humphrey Bogart. Y bueno, luego yo creo que la verdad es que todo el rato ha estado toda su exposición alrededor de todos esos detalles y al final pues nos ha hecho diferentes recorridos en diferentes obras de Mies y yo creo que bueno, nos presenta el deterioro que van teniendo y cómo realmente cuando hacen una intervención, pues realmente, claro, la pregunta era que si es verdad que looking for God, que si estás mirando permanentemente a Dios. Todo, claro, también nos ha indicado en toda su intervención cómo hacen todos los procesos teóricos que hemos estado escuchando estos ayer y hoy, pues por ejemplo en los vidrios, cómo realmente hace ese proceso de selección y de instalación, o no sé, el deterioro del hormigón, que también nos lo ha enseñado, y luego pues en la capilla al final pues hemos visto, bueno, siempre se han visto esos detalles, que es el detalle original y el detalle posterior. Entonces la pregunta sería realmente que si ¿crees que Dios continúa después de esta modificación de los detalles? Realmente o probablemente se mantiene, ¿no? Si después de todo la autenticidad, todo esto que hemos estado hablando todos estos días, el significado cultural, la identidad, continúa inalterable por la gran fortaleza, por supuesto, que tiene el proyecto. Pero es indudable que el paso del tiempo origina que haya que tocar con materiales contemporáneos las obras realmente consideradas patrimonio arquitectónico del siglo XX. Y yo creo que al final, pues me imagino que Mies estará contento y verá que Dios sigue permaneciendo en todos sus detalles. Y ha habido al final una muestra de cómo realmente pues, es verdad que cuando un project manager le ha presentado una serie de manillones para la puerta y realmente, pues claro, es cierto que detrás de las elecciones del material en concreto pues está la bondad de la conservación y de la protección del patrimonio. Y luego también en las últimas imágenes nos ha enseñado algo que también no es que se haya hablado mucho todavía, pero es la importancia del paisaje exterior en la conformación y en el mantenimiento de ese Dios en el edificio. Bueno, pues yo creo que es su turno y sería bueno que si hay alguien, bueno, Pamela, yo creo que quiere, bien, y luego, bien, pues por favor. Well, do you understand what we're doing? Okay, fantastic.
First of all, I want to say that thank God that is Gunny Harbaugh dealing with the Mies buildings in Chicago. And we're very lucky to have such a conscientious preservation architect who is intervening on these buildings. And the other thing I want to say is that as practitioners, those of us who are actual practitioners, we absolutely have to make these types of discrete interventions to improve the way these buildings perform, many of which were experimental, many of which they had no idea how they were going to work until they were actually constructed, and then they realized all the mistakes they made. And that this is very typical in our work to do these small, discrete interventions to assist the building envelope to perform in a better way, because pretty much all of these modernist buildings leak, have major issues with water infiltration. They have flat roofs, which of course was really something that was not traditional from our past so much, unless you were in an incredibly arid or dry environment. You didn't put a flat roof on a building. And also because these buildings really, in the sense that the international style was something about you could put the same building in any part of the world, regardless of the physical environment, the actual weather conditions, and it just didn't work that well. And so I totally agree with Gunny's approach that you absolutely have to do these discrete interventions to assist these buildings to function better so that they can actually survive. Otherwise, what you end up with is indeed an archaeological building, because it's not going to survive.
That was not a question, so that's okay. Thank you.
Bien. A ver, bien, por favor.
I want to make just one comment. You said you asked the question, and it was rhetorical, I know, but you asked the question, is God still in the details? And it's an inside joke, but I think you have to ask the pilgrims, because these buildings are visited by people from Spain, people from Japan, people from all over the world that come here specifically to see those buildings. And I think they're the ones to ask whether they are disappointed or they have fulfilled their desire to see what they think is there. Now, one thing that I didn't talk about, but in this case, but I think is very important, and we always try to incorporate in our work when we're allowed to, and again, we're only able to do what we're able to do, is to include interpretation as part of what we do. Because we have made changes, I think it's very important to try to make an effort to have a display of some kind in a discrete way to explain the process of what went on and what are you seeing. Are you seeing the original travertine at 860? No. I have no problem letting people understand that that's not the original travertine and this is why we had to change it. And I think there was an appreciation of that if they can do that. So, you know, that's a private apartment building. They don't want to have a display in their lobby, so that's probably not going to happen. At IIT, it's more of a better chance of it happening. But at other places, at the Rookery building we worked on and at the Reliance building, those things have actually displays in the lobbies where people can see what it was that went on there, so they have a better understanding of the decisions that went on, because you can't talk to everybody.
Sí, un momento. Claro, pero yo creo que es cierto, pero las interpretaciones, claro, hay unas que están cerca de Dios, muy poquitas, y la mayoría están muy alejadas de Dios. Bien. Vale, a ver, Fernando, please. No, es que, perdón.
David Rivera, profesor de la Escuela de Arquitectura de Madrid. Más que una pregunta, es una observación. Esta es una conferencia sobre criterios y me parece que nos ha dado algunos criterios muy interesantes en esta conferencia. Sobre todo me gustaría destacar una cuestión que es fundamental y que quizá no se ha hablado tanto como se debiera, que es la cuestión del icono, a la que se ha hecho referencia aquí varias veces. Efectivamente, toda la cuestión del patrimonio, que es muy volátil, es una cuestión de valores que nosotros a posteriori hacemos sobre objetos, hacemos sobre los edificios en este caso, Y en concreto el patrimonio del siglo XX y en concreto más aún el patrimonio del movimiento moderno es una cuestión que tiene mucho que ver con el valor icónico, que tiene mucho que ver con los valores formales, con los valores estéticos, y precisamente a lo largo de esta conferencia hemos podido ver que es necesario muchas veces desatender o dar menos privilegios a cuestiones como la autenticidad histórica o la autenticidad material en favor de otros tipos de autenticidad arquitectónica o formal que son más significativas para nosotros, por lo menos hoy en día. Por otro lado, la cuestión del arquitecto o los discípulos del arquitecto que quieren intervenir en su propia obra y que ha sucedido muchas veces y recuerda, por supuesto, al intento de Le Corbusier de restaurar, entre comillas, la Villa Savoie, cambiándola toda por completo, ¿no? Porque ya no le gustaba como era. Hay un criterio actualmente que es interesante recordar que se llama el Year of Significance, el año de significatividad de una obra, y por supuesto lo que se trata es de identificar críticamente ese año e intentar que la restauración devuelva el edificio a ese año de significatividad, que en el caso de Villa Savoie pues es 1929 y en el caso de Crown Hall es cuando estaba el travertino, por supuesto.
That's a very good point, and I made not light of it, but put it in its context with the people that think they know Mies. The problem today is that now, as the time frame has moved forward, and there are more recent buildings that now need to be restored, and the architects are not only alive but they're still practicing. Now we have a different issue about how much involvement do we allow them? And I'll go to the allusion or the discussion about whether these are works of art or not. I think in that sense you think of them more as a work of art because you wouldn't let an artist go into the museum and start painting over their masterpiece that has had a level of significance and understanding as the work that was created at that particular time. So it's very complicated, and every building is different, but I think it raises a really complicated issue as now we're trying to save some of these buildings that are still existing. Before Philip Johnson died, there were a number of his projects that needed to be restored, and he basically said, I don't care what you do to it. Other architects are much more concerned. So it really depends on the individual, and the question is for us as the conservators and the heritage people, how much involvement do we really want to let them have in the say of their own creative work? And I don't have an answer, I just think it's a perplexing question.
La verdad es que si tuviera un pañuelo o tuviera un puro y se lo regalásemos a Ghani, la forma de mimetizarse con el personaje sería definitivamente total. Lo que me lleva a sacar una conclusión, quizá para poder incorporar a nuestro documento de Madrid, y es cómo puede llegar a ser importante el entendimiento del significado cultural de un edificio en el que estamos interviniendo o el conocimiento del personaje, que en el caso del siglo XX, el arquitecto me refiero, que en el caso del siglo XX en muchos casos le hemos podido conocer o podemos estudiarlo con más facilidad que en otros siglos, llegar a mimetizarte de tal forma con el arquitecto que ha construido el edificio donde tienes que intervenir o entender el significado cultural del sitio donde también estás interviniendo, me parece que es uno de los principios fundamentales que deberíamos de considerar a la hora de conservar o de fijar criterios para conservar edificios del siglo XX. El ejemplo de Ghani en sus intervenciones en la obra de Mies, pues yo creo que es evidente, o por lo menos yo así lo entiendo. Esto es más una reflexión que una pregunta, o sería en todo caso una propuesta para incorporar al documento, que creo que ya lo de alguna manera ya lo tiene considerado, ¿no? Ya lo considera en alguno de sus artículos. Pero anticipándome un poco quizá a la jornada de mañana, y te pido permiso, Gerardo, me parece, no sé si sería el mismo criterio, tendríamos que pensar en otros, y esto ya sí que es una pregunta para ti, Ghani, si tenemos que intervenir ampliando un edificio de Mies van der Rohe, no sé si lo has llegado a hacer en alguna ocasión. Lo primero que te preguntaría es si te atreverías a hacerlo. Y la segunda pregunta sería ¿qué criterio más elemental piensas que deberíamos de tener en cuenta cuando lo que tuviésemos que hacer no es conservar, sino ampliar un edificio de Mies van der Rohe? Te lo pregunto a ti, no a Koolhaas.
That's a great question, and I've never had to do that. That typically isn't what we've had to do. Although on the Crown Hall, there is I guess you could say there was a design proposal, and there is one, the Crick and Sexton, which we worked on with them, about adding a more accessible path into Crown Hall. Right now, in the back of the building, there is a elevator that's not very elegant. Fortunately, you don't see it very much because it's mostly below grade. But it's very cumbersome. It doesn't work. It always breaks down. It's not a good technical solution to the problem. And there was a intervention designed in order to bring people down below grade and into the building and up into the building where you wouldn't see it. That could be done. That's not exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about a more significant enlargement of 20, 30, 50% of what we've got. I think in the case of a building like Crown Hall, it's impossible. Because that building there is no side of the building, unless you went under it, which is maybe possible, but probably not in Chicago because of the water table. I don't think you could do it without ruining that building. And now Rem did his addition to the Commons building, and I think other than some details about how they engage the two buildings, I think that it's okay. I think it could have been done better, but I think that the idea of doing it was okay. And the way that they did that is that they held the building away from the original one and still connect to it. And I think that works and has been done many times very successfully, where the original building reads as its own thing and the addition is the addition. It's the mitigation, or the way that you are able to have those two things come together. It's the point where they meet that's always the critical piece. And every building is its own solution, I think, and it can be done. But in the case of Crown Hall, I don't think you could do it. And I don't think you could add another tower to 860 either. They didn't. They built 900, 910 right next door. Those are two new, also by me 2 years later, they built those buildings. So I think in some cases it's not possible. I don't know if that completely answered your question.
Gunny, as a conservation practitioner, you've been entrusted with IIT and working on 860 and these very significant Mies structures. I was wondering if you could comment a little bit about a little bit more on the magnitude of a conservation management plan for IIT, or perhaps the master plan, and also, because of the interventions that you've described, if you could talk a little bit about maybe a maintenance plan for how these buildings might be taken care of in the future.
It's a great question, and we would love to do one for them, but they haven't seen well, first of all, they have issues of having even money to do their maintenance. It's very ad hoc. They have no maintenance plan for any of their buildings. Although the National Register nomination was a start about understanding the complexity of the campus, they haven't seen the need to make the investment, because they have to make a financial, it's not something we would do for free. And while they could probably do something fairly inexpensively, they haven't seen the need to do a holistic view of it. And I think it's a great idea, and we have suggested it to them, but they haven't taken us up on that suggestion. It's always, just like doing the historic structure report is the best way to start a project, the best way to finish a project is to do a maintenance plan and to give some real tools to the owner to follow through on regular cyclical maintenance and stewardship of whatever resource it is that they have.
Gunny, I would like you to comment a little bit about the reception of these works that you have presented today, maybe versus the mediatic acceptance of Rem Koolhaas' edition a few years ago. I mean, I'm not asking you to compare your work with the work of Rem Koolhaas, but I want you to refer to the reception by specialists, by academy, and by the population in general, because it is clear for me that these works are kind of silent, or maybe like a whisper against the scream in the campus that Rem Koolhaas building is. It is kind of paradoxical that you said that there was some kind of reluctance because of the change of the detail, the angle of the detail that you produce, and it is in the same place. I mean, not the same building, but the same place where a huge building by Rem Koolhaas is almost biting a building by Mies van der Rohe. So I would like you to comment a little bit about that.
Well, it's hard. I mean, my perception of how they've been perceived by others is that it's been well received. I mean, most people are very happy with, first of all, the ones that were the most concerned about the condition of the building and the day-to-day, the continued deterioration were the people that were in the building all the time, the professors and so on that, you know, saw this as they were losing this thing. So they're happy that it was fixed, and they're pretty satisfied that the solutions were, they made sense and they were accepting of that and so on. They were engaged in the process, so I think that was important to get their buy-in, as we say it early. But the continued perception of that, I mean, I think people take it for granted. The building is the way that they think it ought to be, and they don't really discuss it all that much. Well, it'll be interesting to see now with Carr Chapel. The outside was restored, and now the inside will be restored. How much of a positive reaction there will be. And I would say that even the architecture students that live in that building every day, they don't really understand what it is that they're in. They all get a dose of Mies, but only through their architecture class. They don't, you know, I'm not saying I should go down there every semester and lecture, and I have done a few lectures down there, but it's not a regular thing where they indoctrinate the students to take care of the building. I have asked Donna to do that. In other words, the students that abuse the building on a daily basis, they should be taking care of the building on a daily basis. And we had a lot of discussions about not a preservation plan, but more of a way to develop a student job where the student would go around, and there is this very beautifully thought about ventilation vent at the bottom of the curtain wall that runs around, and that if you open it and close it at the right time, you actually ventilate the building in the way it was intended to be, and it makes the whole system work better and so on. And we talked about that in the greening of Crown Hall, that for that to really work, it would need a building monitor, someone to watch the building every day, and that would be their job to go around. Well, that could never happen, or didn't happen, and I can see why getting a student to do that is a difficult thing. They just never bought into that. And it's part of this issue of all this effort and expense goes into the planning and thinking and execution of the project, but then when it's done, it's the way it should be. So people take it for granted, I guess, is the real answer.
Bien, tenemos tres últimas preguntas, por favor, y ya nos vamos.
Yo me uno a la compañera de Nueva York, que ha dado gracias a Dios porque usted ha hecho estos edificios, o ha intervenido dentro de estos edificios, porque yo creo que realmente esto es algo verdaderamente importante. Para intervenir en cualquiera de estos edificios de la herencia del siglo XX es necesario un buen arquitecto. O sea, yo creo que esto es muy importante. Tiene que haber un buen arquitecto detrás, porque realmente con un encargo de este estilo uno tiene un gran poder. Uno tiene un gran poder de hacer las cosas mal. Y yo creo que, para resumir esto que estoy diciendo, creo que lo mejor es la frase que le dijo el tío de Spiderman a Spiderman antes de morir. Un gran poder requiere una gran responsabilidad. Gracias.
thank you for the nice words. I will say that, and I hope that you got this in the course of my discussion, but while I certainly had a lot of power in helping make decisions, it wasn't only my decision. There were many people that are involved, and I've always seen architecture, whether it's a new building or restoring a building, as a very much of a team effort. There are many different people, many voices that need to be heard, and on the specific project team, even within my office, it's not just me making decisions. We discuss everything, and yes, I probably get to make the final call on many things. But just like when Mies designed the building originally, you know, and many of these other great architects, they had a lot of people working with them who made many, many decisions that were ratified by the master, so to speak. And I'm not saying I'm the master, but they get ratified by the person in power. But it has to be something that is worked on collectively because they are so complicated. There's engineers, there's the administration, there are the users, all those people all have some participation in the final outcome of what gets done. But you have to steer them, you do have to steer them in the right direction, that's true.
Gunny, your approach to the work and the last questions we have had throw focus on this idea of succession. And after your work, who will come next? What will be the approach of that architect? This has been a problem in Australia where often the work is let by tenders and the approach of one firm may not be the same as the other. It throws great importance on the conservation planning documents, how strongly they are maintained by the owner of the building, be it private, be it government. Do you have a comment on that, the problems of succession?
No, I think it is a problem, and I don't have a good answer. I mean, I can tell you personally. I mean, it's funny because a former boss of mine, someone who her name is Ann Bea. She's a very good architect, and she taught me a lot about preservation. She was my first. When I was in school, I worked for her. And she once said that the sign of a really good preservation architect is that you can't see that you've been there. That means you've done a good job. And I believe that. That's not always the motivation of someone that gets involved in a project like this. And keeping that from happening in the future is something that is a concern to me. And now, even in my own work, some of it's 20 years old, so some of those things begin to be ripe for another intervention, and there's no guarantee that I would get, even though I'm capable here and ready to do it, might not get the project just because of economics or something. And I think you're right that if you have a written document that serves as the guidance for what should be done, that would be a huge help. It's still no guarantee, but it would be a huge help to make sure, to help ensure that the ideas that went into that major intervention could be continued and maintained. And if you actually do the maintenance, the need for a major intervention is lessened significantly. And as you could see at IIT, the problem is they made this major intervention and then they don't maintain it. Even in the case of Crown Hall, they clean it and so on, but they don't really maintain the big problems.
Bien, era la última pregunta, por favor.
Is it possible to know and to show if there is a passage, an evolution between the concept of the abstract box in architecture from the first experience in Europe and the last experience in the USA in terms of materiality, lightness, so light, and linked to this, which are the relation between the two components of a particular that some particulars, architectural particular, has been shown. That means small pieces, technical small pieces. If there is a relation between the component of the architectural design, that means the component of Mies in particular, and the component of the industry, that means the contribution, the help, and the relation between the architect and the industry in the particular. Thanks, and just a but, let's say, about this. But architect and life, let's say life and God are other things.
So if I understood the question, you're wondering if there's a connection between, was it a rhetorical question or was it a real question? Is it an actual question of if I understand the relationship between
The evolution between
Mises?
first experience in Europe and the last experience in USA in terms of design and
Yeah.
materiality of the concept of a box.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll leave the detail of that to the historians. I mean, I'm always quick to say, I'm not a historian. I want to understand my history, but I wouldn't proclaim to make, I have my ideas about that, I will say that, but I'm not going to give you the, I don't know Mises' European work very well at all, frankly. I've seen some of it, a few things, but to make that connection, I mean, it's clear that there's a connection, but his work in America, after he left Europe, I think is much more related to itself than what he left behind, shall we say. Unless, of course, you want to include the Berlin, the museum in Berlin that he created at the end of his career.
The question is from a non-European point of view. So
From a non-European point of view?
from an European.
European.
From the European point of view.
Yes. European point of view. Ya. Sí, bien. Tenemos una última pregunta, ya terminamos. Lo siento, es que no podemos, de verdad. Solo un comentario que ha estado muy bien. Claro, es que hay una diferencia entre hoy y el ayer de la mitad del siglo pasado o antes, ¿eh? Y la diferencia es que ahora, fíjate, cuando ahora mismo has respondido a ti, me parece exactamente justo. Esa frase buena del poder y la responsabilidad, que está muy bien, pero no sabía yo que eso lo decía Spiderman, ¿no? Bueno, pero, espérate que se me va la idea, pero es la decisión colectiva. Hay una decisión colectiva frente a una decisión individual. Antes, la decisión individual era una decisión, bueno, no es que fuera fuerte, es que era eso, Dios. Y ahora, indudablemente, lo que ha dicho Pamela, es verdad. O sea, es un pedazo de arquitecto y que realmente necesitas, claro, pues esos... Yo más, fíjate, que buen arquitecto, que ese concepto de buen arquitecto se ha acuñado mucho y es por supuesto que es necesario, ni lo discuto, pero es la interpretación. Aquí se ha hablado de la interpretación y yo creo que eso es fundamental. Probablemente uno puede ser un buen arquitecto y tener una regular interpretación, ¿entiendes? Hombre, un mal arquitecto que tenga una buena interpretación, eso ya es más discutible, pero no está casado, yo creo, que el buen arquitecto con la buena interpretación. No, yo creo que son dos cosas que ojalá cuando están casadas, como en este caso, la cosa funciona. Pero el otro era la colectividad. Es el equipo colectivo. Ahora las decisiones las marca una decisión que ha dicho, ves, con los ingenieros, con plan, eso es mucha más gente, aunque él marca la dirección. Antes cualquiera le tosía a Mies cuando decía con el lápiz ese que estaba señalando ahí y que decía esto va por aquí. Bueno, eso va por ahí y va por ahí con toda seguridad. Y ahora realmente necesitas que esa decisión colectiva te arrope a ti tu propia decisión, aunque tú la marques. Bueno, disculpadme. Y la última, por favor. Ya, eres tú, sí.
Bueno, llegados a este punto, quería preguntarle qué opina del concepto de autenticidad tal y como aparece en el documento de Madrid, en concreto en el apartado 2.4, y que limita la autenticidad a un aspecto puramente material, ¿no? Con lo cual implicaría no poder intervenir en los edificios, no poder transformarlos y indirectamente no poder conservarlos por el tiempo que nos gustaría conservarlos.
I think that Ron summarized very well the idea and approach that we need to have towards these buildings. However, and I think there's an acknowledgement that we have to have some flexibility in how we address that issue. However, our desire would be to retain as much physical authenticity, fabric authenticity as you can. And that's sometimes a battle. You need to fight for it. You can't just assume from the beginning that, okay, replace all the windows because it doesn't really matter anyway and they're going to get better thermal performance. No, you have to justify the loss of the fabric because it is a loss. I mean, when we took out the travertine at 860, that was a loss. I mean, we didn't do that lightly. We did it after much consideration of looking at alternatives, figuring out what would it mean if we tried to save the 20% of the pieces that may have been reusable. We put them into attic stock. We kept that one section, which, by the way, was required by the state authority. It was a good idea, and it was something we had discussed, but it was mandated by them. So I think it's not a simple question. I do think you need the flexibility. I think it's good that people have thought about that, and it's already in documentation as to how to have that approach. And it's true. It's not just true about modern buildings. It's true of 400-year-old building too. You don't have 100% material authenticity with anything. It's just not possible. So the question is, how do you make that change? How do you make that intervention in a way that makes the most sense? And it could be that you're more true to the design, you're true to the material, the original material choice. I mean, in modern buildings, you don't have a choice. They don't make things anymore, certain things, not to mention the cost of them. So it's not a simple answer.
Bien, tenemos algunos detalles de organización. Sabéis que empezamos luego a las 5 en CaixaForum.
Sí, solo quería, sobre todo para la gente que está viviendo en la residencia de estudiantes, recordaros que el autobús sale ahora, ahora salimos, cogemos el autobús, va a pasar primero por la residencia de estudiantes para que aquellos que os queráis quedar allí o descansar un rato, lo podáis hacer. Volverá a continuación en la residencia de estudiantes, iremos a CaixaForum en el autobús y volverá otra vez a la residencia de estudiantes hacia las 4 para que los que os quedéis allí pues podáis volver a las 5 a CaixaForum, que es cuando se reanuda la sesión. Gracias.